The Drake Ironclad Q&A just dropped. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you to my long-term subscribers. I'm again going to use the renders from Star Destroyer. Don't forget to check out their site. The link is in the pinned comment below if you haven't already checked out their PU tools. Now, I wanted to go over something right at the front, so you don't even have to wait for it. The Ironclad Assault has a retractable roof. The Ironclad Assault has a retractable roof. ... But does not have the tractor beams. So what they've done is they've removed the tractor beams to add in those turrets. And what I think they mean by that is that the power usage of those turrets, remember it's got those quad turrets on the front bottom. It's got the additional turret on the top front. So it's a lot of firepower on the front, right at the ramp where you'd want it. And all that firepower has to get powered somehow. Now, additionally, one of the other interesting things about the Assault is that it still has a control deck, like the other ship, like the regular Ironclad, and I would say that they're closer than I think people were expecting. I think with that retractable roof, it's very helpful for them both to be very, very useful ships. I don't think you're going to be feeling like you're stuck up a creek with either one of these ships because of the rail-based tractor beams on the traditional Ironclad and the extra carrying capacity, and then also on the Ironclad Assault, enjoying still having the retractable roof and doing most of the capabilities, but having to bring something else to actually do the tractor beam, or using the two-hand tractor that people will use that mounts to your back and such. There are weapon racks in the Ironclad Assault, so remember you could just have a couple two-hand tractors and single, the multi-tool with the tractor beam attachment, and be able to have most of the capabilities. And while I'm at it, the retractable roof also impacts the ability to keep oxygen inside the ship. So when you open that roof in a vacuum, it does empty out the air. Now, currently in the game, there are many ships that enjoy having air shields that really don't actually work. So, for those who don't know, the Idris on the front and the back, when you open the doors, has this giant blue glowing thing that basically is an air shield that keeps the environment that's interior of the ship in the ship and not sucked out into the vacuum. And basically, ships can still fly through that air shield to actually land and whatnot. Now, there are a few other ships that do have it. Interestingly, a smaller ship, the Prowler, has air shields. They're smaller. They're designed for the when the doors open on the sides for the hot drop crew to jump out, so you can do your dropship type stuff. They can run out the sides of air shields, so the ship does not ventilate its air into space. Back when the Prowler first came out, it was a novelty. It was said that it was an expensive alien-based technology that's been adopted into UEE tech and into replica ships and such. And it's been around a while. Obviously, it's on the Idris series, but not many ships will have these air shields. In fact, one of the most glaring ones is the Valkyrie, which has a exposed flight deck on the upper it's not a bridge, I call it the cockpit and the crew quarters, the small crew quarters upstairs. They have a hatch for their ladder for security reasons and whatnot, but they have a giant gaping hole on the side of the upstairs that overlooks the lower area. It's almost like a gantry effect when you look through, and helpfully when anybody opens the side doors or the back door, when the vacuum effect does apply to the ship, as it will as we continue to improve the different systems on board of a ship, and engineering starts having more and more impacts, including fire, damage control, oxygen, all that kind of fun stuff. As it slowly comes online, you will vent the dang ship when you open it up if you're in space. But the idea is supposed to be that the Valkyrie is supposed to be planet side and, other things, but that doesn't stop you from using it on a moon. It doesn't stop you from using it anywhere else you dang well please. So it is worth noting, though, that it's kind of built into the design that it's really best used in an atmospheric environment, or the crew has to basically keep spacesuits on at all times, which is fine, honestly. Now, I want to note that there will be changes to suits where flight suits make sense, where you can only sit in a pilotable spot or a co-pilot seat. You can't be wearing like a heavy armor set or, an Atlas suit or something crazy. the thing is, in the future, you will have to factor in those clothing mechanics. And one of the other things that was brought up in the Q&A is that the Ironclad Assault, as I speculated, would have its own armory next to its jump seats at the front of the ship. So on the second floor of the ship, above the ramp that is used by your larger Nova tanks and your other large ground vehicles and whatever else, crews can hang out there. There will be an armory where they can kind of grab and go. Now, they did not commit to that location, but in the Q&A they said basically we're looking at that location. And I speculated before that that locked up area with all these different locking mechanisms and such are basically useless to a PMC, like a private military company, or to another group of org mates that know each other and operate as like a dropship capacity, or a support of an outpost, or taking an outpost capacity. They're going to want quick grab and go, get your gear and go, like armor, weapons, extra mags, utility gear, whatever it is for your mission. They're going to want to just grab and go. Whereas on a traditional Ironclad, you may take on roles where you have stuff that needs to be secured. You're carrying it for other people, or you have people on board that are maybe neutral to you, and they might cause you some trouble. Also, speaking of that, the interior turret that's inside the cargo area has been confirmed to be a combat turret. Now, in the process of the Banu Merchantman being developed, we saw what looked to be a turret on the upper floor of the market space, and many of us speculated that a roof turret would make sense in an area with balconies, that with shops, and then an area below with shops and such. It would make sense to have some type of defensive measure like that, maybe even automated, that would allow you to mitigate concerns, especially if you let people armed on board, or people sneak on board, or people buy a weapon on board and then they cause trouble in those public spaces. In a way, the cargo hold is like your public space. You let somebody on board your Ironclad, they beg for a ride with their gear, their broke down ship, or their vehicle, or whatever it is, and then they start causing trouble. Having a turret on board is very, very useful. So I would say that having an interior turret is going to become less of a novelty and more of a necessity for public-facing ships that you might have people that are less loyal. Also, especially on an Ironclad Assault, it kind of plays double duty. It's not just there to keep the peace with potentially people you've brought on board, but also people that may have snuck on board or shouldn't be there, or fighting to get on board and take the ship. So you dropped, it didn't work out, or the people who you dropped off, you're coming to pick them back up and timing isn't right. You open that gate and then bad people run on board. That turret will buy you a little bit of time for your defensive measures to get in place. The armory, located on the second floor, kind of away from most of the control surfaces, but near the turrets, is an interesting choice for especially the Ironclad Assault. Having that armory near some jump seats and near a bunch of turrets, 4 turrets, is pretty interesting to me. So it's on that end of the ship where you're going to have a whole contingent of players or NPCs in the future, NPCs, I'm guessing, that will be able to move from the turrets to defend repelling borders or something like that. And also, once again, you can use an armory as a utility location too. So if you're in safer space, you might have a couple weapons there just in case type of situation, but most of the time you're not pulling, SR-71s or something. You're pulling a tractor beam. You're pulling a med weapon because somebody yet again dropped a 32 SCU container on somebody's foot or something. And somehow they lived, right? That's going to be kind of the interesting thing, I think, for a lot of people, is just living in these ships when you have these giant openings on the side that vent to space is going to be a wild time. It's a very bare bones ship that does a lot, both types. And I think that it's going to fill a lot of roles, but it's not very finished. It's not very elegant about it, especially the traditional Ironclad. So they talked about the Self-Destruct. The Self-Destruct is a feature that is going to be in both of them, and the Self-Destruct will be separate, so you can fly away in the command module and still self-destruct the other ship. So try to destroy it before they manage to get a hold of the command surfaces and disable the Self-Destruct, and try to claim it as a prize or something. Additionally, if you fly away in the command module, they can't fly the ship, So you can kind of prolong a fight or something. Like, so you're losing the fight, take the command module, run off without self-destructing, then you try to come back with a bigger group to try to take it back. Or engage self-destruct before you leave and just go scorched earth and just say, okay, we don't have enough people, we're just gonna leave. And hope that it gets done before they take complete control and are able to disable it. So, because you can engage the self-destruct from the control panel that's in like the middle top of the ship, and also from the command module, and it depends on where you engage it, that it depends on if it's going to do the whole ship or just most of the ship. So if you do it from the command module, it'll do both. So interesting choices, I think, for a lot of people, and this is what we currently need to figure out. Some of the smaller things that came up in the Q&A were, how will insurance be handled when you detach part of it and you lose the main ship? And they said they're working on the insurance to figure that out. So more to come on that, I'm guessing. By the time this ship comes out, they should have a better picture. They talked about the command module does have a quantum drive, and I'm spending a lot more time than I'd like to talk about that command module. In my opinion, it shouldn't even exist. I feel like the ship would be better off being a more unified ship, and let the Cat be that unique role where it has that type of command module to break away. And speaking of that, they said they're compatible. So they're closely near each other, but the newer one that's on the Ironclad is designed like the command module on the Cat, but it's more modern. So reading between the lines, I'm going to suggest that when the Cat gets its pass, so when it gets its modularity coming up, and I'm guessing that's going to be pretty soon, I think they're going to add this type of command module to the Cat. They didn't say that, but I think there's at least a decent chance of that happening. On another bigger note, and finally getting away from this command module talk, is the ship has heavy armor. And they confirm basically it will be heavily armored, and that implementation will be appropriate to the mechanics in place at the time of launch. They're being vague because there's a lot of discussion about Maelstrom and a lot of the technology around armor in specific. That is like, will the physicalized armor be in this year, next year? When will it be in? And for those who don't know, currently ships have modules with hit points. So if then let's say the left nacelle has an engine in it, and it gets shot, and it has 10,000 hit points, and it takes 10,000 hit points of damage, and there's not enough damage reduction on that to make it matter, it's going to be blown off of the ship. Additionally, the entire ship kind of enjoys having a certain amount of hit points. Sometimes when people talk about like an invincible chin on this ship or that ship, or oh, that ship has a glass back to it or something, what they're talking about is certain items on board. If you turn them towards an incoming missile or torpedo, they have a certain amount of hit points, and they can absorb the hit. It's still taking damage in most cases. Yes, there are some that are not, but in most cases. But in most cases, what people are actually doing is you're turning an item that has kind of an over-tuned amount of hit points, let's say, a high amount of hit points that it really may or may not need there, and you're basically taking the damage on it and that hit point, so the module's not completely destroyed. And I'm simplifying a lot here. I know I'm going to get eviscerated in the comments. Well, actually, it's like I'm not trying to get into the deeper parts of engineering right now. I'm just trying to explain the Q&A that it will have heavy armor. And one of the knock-on effects of heavy armor is going to be its VTOL capacity. So one of the things they talked about was, if you have this heavy armor, does it still VTOL, etc.? And they kept it very simple. Both versions have identical thruster layouts, including integrated VTOL thrusters underneath. And because they're both considered heavily armored, more armor than the Caterpillar is the convention that they used in the original concept pitch. The concern that I have is that I don't think all VTOL is going to be made alike. Does it have the vertical takeoff and landing thrusters on it underneath? Yes. Will they be helpful? Of course. But will they be more helpful, I think, on a moon with limited gravity? Oh yeah. I'm very interested to see what this thing will be acting like on a Lorville or a New Babbage, for example, and trying to come into an outpost or somewhere else. It's an unimproved area, and you have to kind of get around these rocky outcrops and mountains and such. I'll be very interested to see how this thing behaves, because that armor, a lot of people, including myself, believe it will eventually increase its drag, and its performance will be lessened, especially trying to take off. So it may not fall like a rock because you're gonna compensate for it as best you can. But going back up is gonna really either A, chew into a bunch of fuel, B, it's going to consume more energy, so it's going to be slower doing its job, and it's also going to be more unstable. So if something else starts shooting at you and try to take evasive action, you might not have the pleasant results. Or C, both. So both the increased fuel usage and additionally poor performance when you're trying to gain altitude on those VTOL thrusters to assist in atmospheric flight. So just because it has VTOL thrusters does not mean they're all made alike, is all I'm trying to get at. And on a bigger ship like this, it is a blessing still, but I've always been nervous about those type of things. I go back to the traditional, these are much bigger, so to be fair, this isn't apples to apples, but the Idris versus the Kraken. In the past, and this may change yet again, but in the past, multiple times, it's been said that the Idris has excellent VTOL characteristics, where the Kraken can VTOL, but it doesn't have as good performance VTOLing onto planets. Now, that could change yet again. Neither ship is in the game in players' hands, but it's also just based on the design, the amount of thrusters that you can turn, and the amount of mass that you're trying to throw into the air. It's just... I look at this Drake Ironclad and I can't help but wonder that, especially because they directly are trying to talk about how it compares to Hercules in the Q&A in one part. And I feel like that would be a great way to carve out vehicle delivery options for especially the Herc C2 and M2, and give them a niche. So yes, can the Ironclad go down to the surface and come back? Of course. But would you rather use an M2 if you need armor, or C2, especially if it doesn't need armor at all? And now all of a sudden you have a good atmospheric performer that has less armor when it's not as dangerous. You may have a C2 still parked away just for that role to save a ton of fuel and maintenance and the weight, the performance. It'll be able to quickly get in and out of there. And I feel like that's going to be an angle I think a lot of people forget. If you can get 2 runs done or 3 runs done in the time it takes for this thing to do 1, you're gonna reach for that C2 more often. So I'm gonna specifically pick on the C2 because the M2 is less cut and dry. With it has a heavier armor than the C2. That's one of its selling pitches, and it's carrying a little more weight around with the extra turrets. So it ends up being a little more less cut and dry. So anyway, back to topic here of the Q&A. I just feel like this has reassured, I think, a lot of people. No, we didn't get a tractor beam in the Ironclad Assault, but the retractable roof is a great confirmation. Many of us were looking at the art going, how is that not the exact same the roof as the other one? That would have been a huge mistake on CIG's part to not allow that smaller but still retractable roof to retract. And that's something I do want to hit on, is that, remember, the Ironclad regular, the vanilla Ironclad, it has a bigger area versus the Ironclad Assault, which does not have such a big area. But I still think the Ironclad Assault has a role to play, obviously, with its repair facilities, which are mentioned here, and I think I'll capstone it with that. You have that Ironclad Assault capability to repair vehicles, and specifically vehicle modules, which is really exciting to be able to construct those on the spot. So if you have a Nova tank that has a shield generator blown apart, you can just make a new one. But those who are looking at this and seeing in the Q&A that it says, yes, the Ironclad has a repair bay, it's an installed feature, you will not, it is able to do ship components as well, for example. They said yes, but repair facilities are not restricted by type, but more by volume and resources. And they want to go into a deeper, more expansive discussion about that in the future. I think they're still formulating exactly how it's going to look for these type of capabilities, but also I think that word volume can mean a lot. So for those that have been around for a bit, you can remember the original Ares Inferno and the Ion when they first got released. And a lot of people were wowed. A lot of people saw that image of an Idris getting blown up by a single Ion flying by or whatever nonsense. And the images on the pictures of multiple little Ares is just ripping everything to shreds and whatever. And I strongly cautioned people then. I said, no, that's a bespoke weapon. People just don't get it. Yes, it's a size 7 weapon, but it's bespoke. So that means they can tune it to whatever which way they want without having to worry about the other size 7 weapons being impacted. And not only that, the Inferno specifically can be even more tuned because it can only carry so much ammunition on board. So you could have it's a bespoke size 7 on top of the fact that it's hard capped by the size of its capacity of its ammo. So I bring that up because I see this situation with the repair area being able to construct components as a cautionary tale. Yes, it's exciting. I'm not going to BS you. Being able to fit up large vehicles and be able to like take something that's been fallen apart and whatever and turn it into something new is very, very cool. Yes, it's going to be amazing for outpost work. But when it comes to working for ships, volume is going to matter. So if you have a size 2 power plant for a medium or a heavy fighter, you're going to have a situation where, in my opinion now, I'm speculating, opinion, speculation, I believe that it's not going to be able to build something like that. I believe at most it'll be able to build like size 1 gear for a light fighter or a medium fighter or even larger, but in general, like, you'll be able to do at most that, and that's like a best case scenario. They may even hard cap it to size 0 and then turn around and have you just able to do very, very little with it. So for example, on a snub, you could have a size 0 radar, and then you have size 1 other modules like a shield generator, and if you're not able to make size 1 components like a shield generator, then all of a sudden what are you going to do? And then there's additionally, the volume can grow exponentially. Ships are very big. Even when you look at a large class tank or a Spartan APC type of vehicle, the size of those things and scale of them is not as significant as even some medium fighters. I used the Ares, for example. The Ares is massive, and it has a massive gun too. So, I mean, when you start thinking about repairing vehicles, you may be able to like look at it and go, oh, I can make a cockpit mod piece or something, or I can make a specific module, but I can't do everything on that ship, or I can't do every single part and component. So I'm curious how they're going to do that. And will it be hard capped as like, if you put every module in a module spot, does it just equal it's repaired? And armor plating just basically just gets added as like a fixture? And the other thought I had, once again, this is all speculation now. One of the other thoughts I had was, if you have a large enough vehicle, or should I say ship, will you be able to just pump out parts, but it'll take so long to do. It'll consume so many resources. It could take a half hour to produce in real time, to produce all the different parts, and somebody's got to stay on it, building. And some people may be willing to do that, and other people maybe just, look, let's just get this thing, drag this back to civilization. And on the traditional Ironclad, you may not have the repair bays, but you have a bigger space to shove ships in there and then go take them off to go get repaired other places. So that's kind of my trade-offs here that I'm thinking about with this ship. And I'm curious. I'm curious to see how the interplay will go. I also think that this, specifically the Ironclad Assault, will give us just a hint. I'm not saying the same, but just a hint of half of the Crucible's role. So the Crucible, we still haven't seen exactly how it's going to be able to repair a whole fighter on the back of it or something, and ships of that size. And they said they're expanding that like bay area that they're building out. It's not really like a bay, it's like a pad that can kind of be covered, is some of the concepts we've seen. Other times it's been a bay. It's weird, but half the Crucible's job is to repair smaller vehicles like that right on the spot, inside something, or take them to places. And then on the other side, it repairs larger vehicles that it sits next to and is supposed to spin around and handle that. Well, the first half on the smaller ships and such, we'll get a little hint of how that type of gameplay will work with this system. So the Ironclad Assault, I think, is a very exciting ship to me. I'm not that disappointed that it doesn't have a tractor beam. I would have liked to have seen it have one tractor beam. No, it doesn't have to be on a rail or anything. It's a shame it doesn't have at least one, but it is what it is. It's still got the retractable roof, so it's not a game-breaking issue for me. And I'm very excited for both ships. I can't wait to see them happen. And that's where I'm going to kind of wrap this up. Thank you to my long-term subscribers for sticking around. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. I wish you all a wonderful night.